I kept on asking my mom, why am I adopted? How did this happen?
I would have never in a million years thought I'd be raising white children.
The first thing I saw was that they were foreign.
I was feeling grateful and I was feeling guilty.
I'd rather deal with the pain and see them raised happily than hide from it.
Happy Mother's Day, Mommy. You love her?
这个是老公，这个是老婆，这个是婚外情。他们三个人谁痛苦谁快乐。
我在就是不管求助者他是婚姻有问题还是出现第三者了，
因为他没有方法，我们就可以告诉他方法呀，甚至我们可以帮他解决这个问题。
一离，孩子跟谁？
就是当务之急了。您看怎么能让我进去哈？
过一会儿我那个朋友他想打羽毛球，待会儿来了，你稍微教教他啊。那心不知道都操到哪儿了。
他说您喝完酒，好像是叫了个名字，但不是他。骨子里小三是不配得到一份完整的爱，真正去当这个第三者的时候，他是不配得到一份完整爱。
而且它是一个这个爱这个东西，我觉得它会，它可能不经意间它就开出来一朵花，有可能哪一天它就枯萎了。
那么你让我怎么办？你帮我一分为二，
赞成。
那咱出去就上医院是吧？一分为二。
Please just tell me everything.
Ngày 25 là tháng 1. Bác Cường làm restaurant trong trại lính Cam Ranh Bê. Làm nhà hàng Hép Ba Lan. Cái lính nó mới tới ăn. Má mới quen ông Lộc. Chỉ ông Lộc thôi mà nói thật rồi. Ông Lộc, ông ấy cao mà mũi thẳng. Ông cũng ngăm như vậy thôi, ngăm người, cùng hải quân luôn. Ông ấy khoe má là ông ở Đà Lạt.
With Marcos serious relationship or just bạn thôi or what?
Coi như là bạn qua đường thôi.
Was there any other men?
No.
Well,
No.
Má có ngủ mấy
Không.
nào nữa không?
Không.
Má nói sự thật vậy?
Sự thật đấy. Tao đâu có ngủ với ai nữa.
okay.
Quyết chân như vậy, chỉ có ông Lộc thôi.
Mà nhớ không, last time đấy con interview má đấy. You told me con you shouldn't do the DNA test because maybe là ông Lộc or maybe ba Tèo, vì má nói ba Tèo rape má. Tiếng Việt là
Giống như là má
nhưng
nói
mà
là ông đấy hiếp ra má.
Nhưng mà má nói là má không có chịu.
Ông đấy hiếp ra má.
Nhưng mà không có thi hấp, nhưng mà không hiếp được. Nhưng mà bây giờ thì đúng thằng Lộc rồi, còn gì nữa, thét rồi.
Good morning, everybody. You all made it here. I hope the BART situation has been resolved. It's so great to see everyone here today. Thanks for being with us. These films are all about difficult conversations, as you can see from the trailers. And I'm really excited to have these three panelists here, all of whom I've known for a long time and have done a lot to get these films to this festival, which you guys should all make note, all these films are playing, and you definitely have to see them. They're incredible. I'm going to start by reading bios, just so we have some groundwork for who these folks are. Tony is an Oakland-based filmmaker whose work explores the Vietnamese refugee experience, Enforcing the Silence, Diop's Last Day at the Ironing Board Factory, and the overlooked stories of individuals and communities that make up the fabric of the town, such as Fresh Frozen and I See Me. Chithra, in the middle, is a physical therapist turned filmmaker with an MFA in film from the University of Texas, Austin. She identifies as Tamil. Her films reveal the extraordinary in the everyday, honoring the unique wisdom, resilience, and love that define both biological and chosen families. Her short film, Rags to Pads, tells the story of a husband who destigmatized menstruation and framed it as a societal issue, not just a women's issue. Her next film, Foreign Puzzle, is a poignant exploration of motherhood that contrasts cancer's brutality with the resilience of dance. Her newest film, Love, Chaos, Kin, fills a critical gap in the mainstream adoption narrative by highlighting multicultural and multiracial families through the lens of immigrants and people of color. Elizabeth Lowe is a filmmaker whose documentary films have been showcased by Venice, Toronto, Sundance, IDFA, Tribeca, MoMA, and AFI Fest. She's been featured in Filmmaker Magazine's 25 New Faces of Independent Film, Doc NYC's 40 Under 40, and Cannes Lion New Director Showcase. She is a recipient of artist fellowships from Lorcano, New York Film Festival, Yaddo, and McDowell, and was selected for the Concordia Studio Fellowship and Gotham HBO Documentary Development Initiative. Her debut feature, Stray, won Best International Feature at Hot Docs and received nominations for the Independent Spirit Awards, Critics' Choice Documentary Awards, and Cinema Eye Honors after premiering at Tribeca. Mistress Dispeller has played at over 50 festivals and won 15 awards since premiering at Venice and TIFF in 2024, and will be theatrically released by Oscilloscope in 2025. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to start out with you, Elizabeth, because your film sets this panel up for us really well with the card that you see when you start watching the film. And one of the opening cards, the opening scenes, actually says, we got permission from these participants at the beginning of the filming and also again at the end of filming. So could you explain to me a little bit about the decision, number one, to put that card and what that means to you from the filmmaking side?
So we did test screenings with audiences where we didn't have that card explaining how we obtained consent and how that consent must have changed over time with their understanding changing over time of who the Mistress Dispeller was and what role they played in their life. And we noticed that people had a really negative reaction when they had no idea about consent. And so we felt it was really important as filmmakers to put that up front at the beginning because it feels like such an impossible story to film. The husband and the mistress couldn't have possibly known what the film was directly about at the beginning for the Mistress Dispeller to do her work because some level of deception is involved in her work. So we had to kind of explain that in the card, that they signed on to a film more broadly about modern love in China, but by the end of the process, they were given the opportunity to reconsent to be in the film, and that if they chose to drop out, we would respect that. And that happened with several other couples that we filmed with, and we had to respect that. And we had, my producer, Emma D. Miller, and I, we had a whole backup plan for the alternative film that we would make if our core participants were to drop out. And so that's why it was really important to sort of like let audiences breathe and like be at ease as they're watching the film and watching these, you know, kind of jaw-dropping scenes unfold in front of you without wondering too much about the ethics, because we were really, Impact Partners was our financier, and they were very also, you know, they were like, you have to be very transparent about how you ethically made this production where deception is a part of the authentic sort of reality of these cases.
I love the quote in the teaser, which says, how did they make this film? That's the big question. It's incredible access. Chithra, you have like a different sort of film where the longevity of the project is really key to the story, and it's incredible when you're a filmmaker to be able to spend that much time on a project. How long were you on the project, and what were the beginning conversations like for you? Because obviously these stories change over the years, and you probably had sort of similar issues of adjusting what the film was going to be and what you were asking for in terms of consent.
Wow. Thank you for the panel, and wow, excited, Elizabeth, about what you just shared. I started filming in 2017, and I'd only asked for 3 days, permission to film for 3 days. And it was for a short film, and I wanted to film around the festival Navratri, which is about women and power of women. And filming them for 3 days, I realized there was a deeper story. There was this relationship with the birth mother, and that's when I asked for more access. And they were hesitant for understandable reasons. They did not. I didn't know it was going to be this many years, but at that point I was like, can I film longer? And can I also talk to the birth family? Right, so consent was constantly negotiated at different stages. Consent was asked from the children at every point, right? If there was a day we were going to film, explaining what this was for them, asking them permission. And even before the premiere, we had a conversation with all of them to ask, do you want to see the film before? Do you want to see the film with the audience? Half the family wanted to see it before and half wanted to see it with the audience. So the half that wanted to see it before have seen it. There were really difficult scenes in the film, which I don't want to talk very specific about, but each one of those, again, became a point of conversation about, okay, what are you doing with the scene? Why do you want to film this? And so it was. There were times where it was a hard no from their side, and we had to respect that. And there were times.
What were the no's for?
The no's were like, so there's an instant in the film where they spent some time with their birth mother, and it was over 5 days, and they were like, you can pick one thing to film every single day, and then you're out because this is their time with their family. So I would pick something and then film it, and then they'll do something else that's far more important for the film. And yeah, there was no way that they were going. Yeah, but and so yeah, there would be things you had to make a choice in advance, and that was not always the right choice. But yeah, they were very strong. And then there were times where they were allowing me to film, and I was like, I wouldn't film this if this was my niece or nephew, and I did not film. So sometimes it was from my end, and sometimes it was from the parents' end. And there were times the children had, there were things that the children didn't want me to film. Like they were having digital exchanges with their birth mom, and they were like, okay, that's off limits, you're not filming that. So yeah, there were boundaries at every stage.
Tony, we saw a piece of one of the most difficult conversations you had in your film. But I know from having filmed my own family that sometimes you don't actually ask for all the permissions up front, and sometimes you don't even know what you're doing. What was that process like for you? And did you start with your mom? Was this journey, did you start there? It feels like that in the film.
Hello. Okay. I hear my voice. Okay, so a decade ago, I made a short about my mother's last day at work on an ironing board assembly line. And so I've been filming her for, I'd say, on and off for the last 15 years. And at that point, 10 years ago, there's a little monologue scene where we're eating together, and I basically say, like in voiceover that I'm scared to talk to her about my father. And so fast forward, January 2020, my mother had a mini stroke, and that became kind of the impetus for talking to my mother about my dad. I'm also a parent and of 2 kids, and they're also in the film. And so they had been asking me about my father as well, their grandfather. And so, but because of my relationship with my mother, it's been kind of tenuous over the years. She's never been like a reliable narrator, and so I went back to Indiana. That's where I was born and raised, to talk to my mother and do some will stuff and like check up on her health. But I actually turned to cousins first to ask them what they've heard over the years in terms of rumors about who my dad might be. and then I went and talked to my mother about it. And so she's been comfortable to be filmed and talk about things. As you can see in this clip, one of the things I did with the kind of tough conversation was I have a younger half-sister whose Vietnamese is a lot better than mine. And so she served as a translator, which was necessary for that conversation to really happen, for me to talk to her about the past and some of these things I've heard.
Elizabeth, the Mistress Dispeller, her job is to get close to the husband and find a way in to sort of disrupt these relationships. And you, now I know you saw her do that more than one time. How does, what's her MO? Like, what is her method for like getting in next to these guys and getting them to open up to her? Because that is in itself like a very difficult access point and very difficult conversations to have for a stranger entering into that kind of situation.
So I've asked her, like, why don't you just enter into these relationships as a family counselor or a therapist? And she says that if she didn't lie about where she came from, like by saying, I'm your wife's, old ex-college roommate, or I'm a long-lost cousin on your wife's side, that if she positioned herself as a true professional, the husband would typically reject her instantly, because in China, domestic shame should not be made public. So the idea of allowing a professional therapist who is truly a stranger into your life and confessing your family problems to that person would be unthinkable to a lot of middle-class Chinese people, because therapy is still stigmatized. And so by positioning herself as some kind of relation, a distant relation that's connected to the family somehow, that she has a better way into gaining the husband's ear. So that's partly why her MO involves deception and taking on these false identities. And that's her justification for why she does what she does.
I mean, she's kind of a brilliant interviewer. Like, I want to learn from her. Is she, are there patterns in the way, like, once she's in there, but are there patterns to what she's saying to them? Because these guys are spilling their guts, like, immediately. Yeah. And did you notice any patterns?
What she does is she really she mirrors, which I think a lot of manipulative people do. And she also really comes from a place of no judgment. And they can feel that from her. And as a film crew, we also came in with no judgment, and that was like our ethos. And I think when the guys feel that there's not judgment from her, they also are in a position that's tricky. They understand that they're in a tricky position. So I think, especially for the character that's in our film, he wanted to offload some of that, who in his life, there's no one else he can offload this secret to, or his feelings for this other woman to. And I think her positioning in his family really becomes this figure that he can really open up to in a way that is rare in his life.
Tony, some of the difficult conversations are actually with yourself in the film. You are a subject within your own film. You're very vulnerable on camera. What do you think are the circumstances or the environments that allowed you to open up to that vulnerability? I know with personal films, sometimes it takes a while. You resist putting yourself on camera. You're resist being vulnerable on camera. I noticed that you actually had a lot of men in the film that were by your side and supporting you in moments. And I'm just curious if you could talk about maybe the presence of other men in your film, or maybe how you yourself stripped away to have those conversations with the audience.
I've been joking around that this film could have been called Years of Tears. Yeah, I mean, in the edit, like the festival cut, I'm calling it my director's cut, because it's like if I could have my cake and eat it version. And so it's like I'm just crying all the time in it. But it also, like, one of the rumors was that a cousin of mine, like a first cousin, like that we share the same pops, like that our dads are the same. And I was so nervous to give my cousin a call to see if he'd be willing to take a DNA test with me, just because I'm scared of getting rejected. But he was down to do it, and he was just so open and kind of a little bit the opposite of me, just like in terms of like, like whatever the results are, like we're still brothers kind of thing. And so I think just the fact that especially on my mom's side, I don't know, they're all like characters that can work on screen. So even people were like, my cousin Dale, the one that, ends up not being my half brother, but like people are like, oh, he deserves a little short himself, you know. But I think I just had the privilege that folks on my mom's side were just so open, and for me now, in reflecting on my journey and what I did, documenting this search, that I feel really blessed that those folks were open to talking, including my mother, that it was like an expression of love to they're really rooting for me as well. And so they being vulnerable, I think, you know, made me also want to be vulnerable as well. And my kids are in the film, and as someone that didn't grow up with like a father figure, like positive, or, you know, well, I did have a stepfather that was really negative for a handful of years, but, you know, like as a father myself, I'm trying to also model something else for my kids, in terms of, being open and communicative and so forth, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. You know, there's also, I remember Sapna mentioned there's also a lot of alcohol that helped apply some of these conversations on your side. There's some really funny moments in a very difficult film when you watch Tony's. Chithra, you were navigating difficult conversations with children, and even, you know, they were babies at some point. What was, you know, is that times that easier, or is it more difficult? What, you know, describe that process for you.
With the kids, I call them, like our interviews, I call them confessional booth interviews kind of thing. And over time, in the beginning, they would build a camera kit with me. So I'd go home, I spend the weekend with them. So, you know, the first thing we do is we build a camera, and we are like playing, the kids and I. And when we are building the kit, they kind of talk about how school was and stuff. So we kind of come to the topics that might be worth talking about. And there was a lot of sibling rivalry and stuff. So we would then go to their rooms, were the place that we would have this filming in, and whatever their age was at that time. If they were into Legos, then that would be like, you know, we would pick that. And the interviews with the children are usually 10 to 15 minutes. That's the attention span. And so it's one question or maybe two questions, and there's a lot of waiting because and when you wait, it comes out in beautiful ways, and it's also sometimes really funny. So I have to like keep, like, because they're saying something that is very serious for them, and it is ridiculously funny, and I have to keep a straight face till it finishes. And because I'm interviewing, I mean, sometimes I was interviewing them, and I think the youngest child was 3 or 4 sometimes when she's doing her interviews. And so I had a parent kind of in the next room, kind of listening in, maybe if I was going to ask a question that they didn't want me to ask or something. So that was our, but that didn't, I mean, after the first few months, they stopped wanting to even be there, the parents, and so that was our process. So one of the children disliked these interviews, so, you know, she would pick, like, there will be moments where she'll be like, I have something to say, can you interview me? So sometimes it'll be like that with her. The other two really were like divas, that anytime I'm coming in, if I miss an interview, they're like, hey, you have not done our interview this time. So sometimes I would do an interview even if I didn't need one, because, so it was like, I lost my tooth. I have a tooth fairy story to tell, you haven't asked me, so I have to do those interviews, yeah.
You have to budget like extra film for children.
Thank God I wasn't filming. And this time when they were watching, they were like, are we going to get that footage? Like all the stuff that's not in the movie.
Elizabeth, there's, the mistress says to the husband at some point, your thoughts are too profound. And I love that line in the film, but it made me think a lot about how Chinese culture is often spoken in the margins, where, you know, even in that scene, you know, you see the translation, but a lot of what you're getting out of that scene is in your body and in the margins of the language. And, you know, were you surprised at how direct a lot of the conversations were, despite that sort of being what I believe is a characteristic of the culture?
Yeah, I think I mean, even in the scene that you're talking about, it's a scene where the husband and the mistress are kind of like, they haven't seen each other in a month, and they're seeing each other for the first time after kind of being cracked apart by the Mistress Dispeller. And the mistress is really confronting the husband about why he's seeing her less. And he's kind of talking in circles in a way where I think it's when like a guy is too cowardly to directly break up with you. And so they're speaking in metaphors. And I find that scene so relatable when you've been on the receiving end in whatever capacity. And that's what I love about sort of like the footage, even though it's, you know, this industry is only specific to China and maybe could only thrive in China in a culture where you're trying to talk around things and never directly talking at things, that there's something really universal about like the emotions that they're going through that just happens to be on camera.
And yet some of it's so straightforward. I mean, I was also filming in, you know, Chinese culture in Chinatown, which is different from filming where you were filming, but you know, there's something very on the nose about some very sensitive things that I thought was really surprising.
And I wonder, I wonder too if it has to do with the presence of the camera, allowing them, inviting them to be a different self than they would normally be. Like there are some conversations where like the wife is reminiscing with the husband about the past, which I don't think she would have. We never directed anyone what to say or do, but I think she used the presence of the camera crew as an opportunity to talk about things with her husband that may be more sentimental. Yeah, that she would never normally breach. So I think the camera plays an interesting role in us documenting this case.
Yeah, I'm curious how you two feel about that. Did the camera help or hurt the difficult conversations for you?
It obviously interfered. I mean, I feel like if it didn't exist, it would be a different conversation. But I don't know. I don't know if it I can't say if it helped or not, but I don't know. Yeah, in the absence of it, it might have been a different conversation. But there were moments I'm like, why are y'all allowing me to film this? You know, that was definitely there. There were moments where I'm like, if I breathe, if they hear me breathe, they'll ask me to turn the camera off. You know, kind of. So
you held your breath the entire time.
Yeah, I didn't even want to move, and I'm like, the light is crappy, or I'm not sure about my microphone at this moment. But I'm like, if I do anything right now, I'm going to disrupt this moment. And obviously, after the moment, then I'd have a conversation, because if I felt like it was something. So there are moments I'm not sure why they allowed, but let me take this. I feel like, at least in my film, I feel like every single one of them wanted their story shared, and they had a deep interest in telling their story. So they were really invested in the making of the film. But I don't know if, and there were scenes I don't know if those conversations would have gone different without the camera. I don't know.
Tony, did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
You know, I think the camera did help, but I except for like the setups, like the conversation scene with my mother, you know, we used very small, kind of like lo-fi cameras, and especially in Vietnam, so kind of it was just on, like. But there's one scene in my film. It's a kind of bedtime conversation scene with my kids, and at the time we were all sleeping in one bedroom. And I actually just recorded it with an audio recorder. And so my daughter's like, why is that light on over there? And I'm just like, oh, you know, like I'm charging it. And so because it was just, I knew that when we were lying there together, they would want to talk about things, ask me things. And so there's a scene where my son's like, you know, like, Papa, like you need to find out who your dad is before, you know, Grandma dies. And so yeah, that was one time where, like, yeah, with my kids, shooting sometimes without them knowing until you know, that's when it, yeah.
I will say that the Mistress Dispeller did say that if the cameras weren't documenting this case, people's emotions would be far more heightened, and they would even potentially get physically violent, as they do in her other cases. Wow. So the camera acts as this like muter on people's baser, darker emotions. It's like suppressing it down, and what you're seeing in the footage is like a negotiation between performance of your best self because of the camera's presence and your dark raw emotions creeping
I mean, I think as filmmakers, we're always struggling with that. Like, how small does the team have to be? Do I have to cover the red dot with a piece of tape? Like, and I think, how much are you guys doing to make the camera disappear, or do you feel like it's important to be there? Or, I mean, you even, like, some people are, you're misdirecting to your kids.
The other thing I noticed was sometimes they were not saying things, but they were doing a lot of things with their eyes and body language, which was like, that was, that said, I felt like that had it was much stronger an expression of disapproval or a consent in a way that also was interesting body language to document instead of words.
And for us, our strategy, because the film is a lot of long takes that are fixed frame, that enabled us on a practical level to hit record once we figured out where the conversations were happening, and the crew would all leave the room. So most of the scenes that you see in the film, the crew was never there because we were trying to help them be as unself-conscious as possible.
I mean, Tony, one of the most moving or impactful scenes for me in your film is the scene where you're in your car. You've gone through this process of narrowing down some of the guys that could be your father, and now you're like cold calling, knocking on people's doors, and you're trying to decide how to approach them and what makes sense in approaching them. And then there's this scene where you've sort of decided upon a little bit of a misdirect. You're saying, like, I'm looking for, maybe you can explain it. But I'm kind of curious about, the scene that I'm talking about is you've decided upon a misdirect, and then you're actually in the car struggling about why am I misdirecting, and is that okay? And I really love that scene. Maybe you can just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I had a lot of people help me, like, in terms of searching and so forth, like, in addition to my own family, cousins, and so forth, I actually brought on a YouTuber, a Vietnamese-American YouTuber. His name is Kyle Lay. He's, for Vietnamese folks, he's semi kind of well-known. And one of his things is making YouTube videos that are like family reunion videos. And so he ended up coming along with me on what you're talking about, Ursula, like knocking on people's doors. And basically, my mother was adamant that my father's name was, I'm just going to abbreviate, was Loke. And so I had an investigative reporter friend like locate all the Lokes in America between the ages of 68 and 80. And I went and knocked on all their doors. But I was too afraid to go up to them and just be like, hey, is your name Loke? Like, you might be my dad, or, so I basically, I told a lie. I mean, I was just like, I'm looking for my dad's friend. He was in the Navy together in Vietnam, blah, 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 blah. But then there was one guy that was like, yeah, I was in the Navy. Yeah, and like and I was like, oh shit. And like when I went up to him, he kind of looked like, I felt like he could be my father. And so then there's a scene, I think that's what you're talking about, where I'm like conflicted. Like I'm like, man, I don't really like what I'm doing. Like, this lie that I'm telling. And you'll hear Kyle, the YouTuber, he kind of, we have a back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, your ethical struggle is on screen, and I think that's really beautiful, because I think I feel like this is a lot of the backstory of making these difficult films and making these incredible films with incredible access is, where are the lines? And you guys have all talked in small ways about that, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about, when we're hiding behind the curtain, are we feeling guilty about that? When we're filming something that's uncomfortable, are we getting consent right after that? And maybe you can talk about the moments that you felt that kind of conflict on these productions and where those conversations and decisions led you.
I think kind of related to what you were saying, sometimes it's inexplicable what people are willing to let you film. There was one couple that's not in the final film that we filmed with, where, in one scene, the husband is telling the wife that, he's never cheated on her, and then 15 minutes later, after the wife exits, he's with his mistress in front of me, and he's making a move on the mistress, and I'm right there with my camera, and I don't understand what he's thinking and what he thinks I am doing and what I'm thinking. He just seems oblivious. And in those ways, we decided this kind of character or person, the character is so poor that, to put him on the screen showing this kind of behavior would be a disservice to him and his family, and so we didn't want to put them in the film. And that is, in the editing, we're making choices to protect our protagonists and whoever has decided to be in our film.
I mean, is the goal to get everything you can in production and then make the ethical decisions and edit? I don't know. Did you delete that footage? No.
I mean, to that point, I mean, yeah, there's several scenes in my film where, you know, there's a couple of conversation scenes that are reenactments where I use a voice actor because I didn't have access to the person, and those conversations weren't recorded. It was phone conversations, and so I had to get legal counsel to what do I do here? Some of those people that I went up and knocked on their doors, like you'll see in the film that it's like, oh, this camera's angle is weird or whatnot, and so I had to consult with my attorney just to find out what you know, how risk, you know, is how high of a risk is this and stuff. What was I going to say? But there were times in Vietnam, especially, if folks are like, they see the camera, they're like, turn it off. Like I'm like, turning it off. Yeah, so.
I mean, some decisions were definitely made in the edit because, you know, there were broad guidelines within at least for the minors in the film. There were things that the parents were like, this is off limits, right? But when you're filming over 8 years, things happen that they forget that they had said this is off limits, and they let you film. And so there's stuff that we ended up filming, you know, that would have made really dramatic scenes, but which, you know, technically have consent for or whatever, and it could have definitely heightened the drama of the film, but it just wasn't what they would have wanted. Even though, you know, sometimes you're in the moment and you also don't realize that was, you know, that was something that was off limits or whatever, right? And then there were some really interesting conversations I've had. Like, so without sort of giving away too much in the film, because it's premiering, it's a world premiere, so I want y'all to come and see it on Sunday. But there's one of our mothers has a really difficult housing insecurity situation, and, you know, right, I go to New Mexico and this happens, you know, so I didn't know that she was going to be in this situation, and then right after we film a little bit, she's like, this is a really bad situation for me, but it's good for your film. So we actually sat and we had that conversation and we filmed it because, you know, she's like, I can see how this can be a plot point in the film. This is great for your film. This is really shitty for me, and, you know, and this was, I mean, when this happened, I mean, it's, you know, it happened, when you're filming it, you don't know how it's going to fit into the film, and it happened almost 5 years ago, so, and, you know, it was hard to tell her one way or the other when we were having that conversation, except that, hey, when we are done filming and when we are in the edit place, we'll have a conversation again about how the scene is going to be in the film, and then we can revisit this, right? But at this point, are you okay with, you know, what parts of this can we film and what parts of it we cannot film? Because at this point, that's the only decision we can make. So sometimes that's sort of like, let's talk about what we can film, and then if there are things that are in the border area that you are sure or not sure, and you're okay with filming, and, you know, can we revisit this in the edit? Like, sometimes the decisions were like that.
Can I say something real quick? So in my film, I meet a half sister who I never knew about, and I asked her for permission beforehand if I could film us meeting for the first time, and she gave me the green light, but then her husband wasn't comfortable with it, and so it's not in the film, but I had a camera on me, like, as I'm driving to meet up with her, and being like, man, like, the director in me wants this scene, but, like, why can't I just enjoy this moment of meeting someone, you know, who's willing to meet with me, who's my half-sister? But I'm mic'd up, and it's like one of these scenes where, like, when she sees me, she's like, oh my gosh, you look so much like Dad. And I'm just like, oh fuck, how am I gonna, like, reenact this thing? Like, you know, like, but I mean, it worked out later. But it was that struggle of like, especially with my film, being a personal film, it's like, okay, all right, I'm a person, I'm gonna meet somebody, but then I'm wanting to have this on camera, and so I was quite conflicted in that moment. Yeah.
Can I? Did your characters ask you about each other? Like that would happen in my film. Like one mom will ask about another mom, and I'll be like, no, you all have to have your conversations. I'm not going to.
No, so we actually tried to keep our sort of direct interactions with the clients of the Mistress Dispeller to a minimum, and the Mistress Dispeller wanted that by design because she didn't want us to inadvertently sort of leak anything to them or influence them through conversations or if they were spilling their hearts out to us. So we actually kept all of that to a minimum until the end.
I had to draw the line between, like, I had to tell them, like, you have to talk, like, whatever I'm talking with this mom, it stays here, whatever I'm talking with the other mom, like, I'm not going to say what this person said, like,
We always just, like, focused on small talk, and we never got into, like, deep personal things, because we were saving that for the Mistress Dispeller. And
these participants are all just living their lives, and you guys are sort of behind the scenes, very intentional about what you think you might be seeing or filming. I feel like I get really hyped up before something that I know is a big event or a big interview. Do you guys have like a pregame routine, and what is it? Like personally, how do you like hype yourself up, get yourself ready? Is it lining all your pencils up in a certain way? What do you do to get ready for these difficult scenes that you're about to enter into?
I think for me, because the style that I've made films in has been very much observational, fly-on-the-wall, documentarian. I'm not directing anyone or telling anyone what to do. I'm just reacting to what they're doing. So for me, so much is not within my control anyways. So I every day I just go into it sort of like, oh, we'll see what we get.
You empty the brain before you go in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm very anxious when I have information that the other people in the story don't, and I know that some of it is going to spill out on camera. So a lot of sleepless nights. And there are moments where, like, much later in like 2 years ago when we were filming, the children were at this point navigating access to their father's side of the story, and that was when the parents kind of put their foot down. Like, they didn't want me to film some of the stuff directly because to be, as much as there was so much filming happening on their lives, and when you watch the film you think I was filming everything, they were very, and I really appreciate them for that. They were very, very, very conscious of when something was deeply emotional and stressful for them, that they didn't want the camera to be there. So those were times where I had to constantly tell myself, I'm not making reality television. There's always another way to sort of get this moment. But those were not easy days during production where I'm like, have I done everything to communicate why this is important? Was I persuasive enough? And then you're always like, you're wondering what else could you have done, and feel like, is that why my film is not going to go? You second guess everything, and those are very difficult points. And so I have a bunch of mentors I have on speed dial where I'm like, I call them, and then we think of, okay, what other ways can this moment be brought into the film in meaningful ways? Yeah.
Anything to add, Tony?
Well, if you see my film, you'll see that I'm always, there's like, if there's a new lead or a new person that I might be meeting, like I'm quite anxious and nervous on screen. So I think I'm still learning how to.
I think you cook. I think you cook a big meal or something. That's your pregame. Or dance.
I think I'm still learning like best practices in terms of how to prepare for things. So, yeah.
In my experience in Asian American culture, it's often very important to have an intermediary between you and whatever you're trying to get at. I wonder if you guys agree with that. And I feel in Tony's case, it feels like it plays out very clearly with Cousin Z. Maybe how that type of role played into the access for your films.
When we were filming with the Native American community, we had an intermediate. Like we kind of had to have a cultural expert when we were in that, mostly because one, access was hard, and then we also felt like culturally we wanted, as the film team.
This was the native community. Yeah.
We did not, and then we felt like we wouldn't get access also otherwise, so we did have to, but not with the rest of the film. With other participants, we didn't have to.
I was just thinking as you were asking about anxiety, and the anxiety that I don't feel, I think in large part is due to, I have this producer, Maggie Lee, who's based in China, and she acts so much as the intermediary between like my desires, what I would want to film, and then what's possible. And so it's never sort of like a direct line of communication. And I think that does help a lot.
And Tony, did you feel like you needed to use, I mean, it's a very frustrating thing for the viewer because your intermediary is resistant in your film.
Oh, yeah, that's who you're talking about. I thought, like, so, like, I mean, because my language skills are so terrible, like Vietnamese language skills were so terrible, you know, like I wouldn't have, I think that's the little excerpt that you saw, the conversation scene with my mother, like if it wasn't my younger sister, if it was just like a very good Vietnamese interpreter, it might have been a different kind of, you know, the results might have been different, but because it was just, you know, brother and sister and mother, this intimate kind of family conversation. But yeah, with Z, yeah, I mean, I really tried to respect her, and you know, for nearly 2 years, I matched with the first cousin on an ancestry site on my father's side, and so she became kind of like the golden ticket that had access to all these other folks. But do you want me to just do spoilers? I can just do spoilers.
Has anyone seen any of these films here? They're all playing later, so definitely schedule yourself to see them. Can you guys understand the conversation without if you give us
I do want to add one thing though, like, you know, with the Indian family that I was filming, right? You know, they are of a upper caste than me, so that was interesting for me to sort of navigate as a storyteller, because I feel like my grandparents' generation probably would not have been in the, you know, they would not have had access to that space. Or my parents would have been uncomfortable to do something like that. And I was going and staying in their home and filming. So initially, at least for the first few months, I was definitely feeling like, I'm of a lower caste, and like this sort of the caste dynamics. Not that they were doing anything, but there's so much of ingrained, that in your system that you need to navigate, and also the power of that, right? Like to be of someone of a lower caste to sort of frame the story, although that it's lost in everything. That definitely was something I had to unlearn a little bit as I was filming through in the spaces for relief, and it was I think it was after 6 or 7 months of filming that me and the participant had a conversation about that. Hey, what does this feel like? And then we spoke about what it was for her parents and someone from my caste. What would that dynamic have been over generations, because her mom is there sometimes, and that was again, those things don't get into the film, but it definitely informed how our relationships was navigated.
You mentioned a moment ago, part of her film actually goes into Native American culture, and I feel like there are some things that are unsaid and unasked in that. Maybe, I don't know if I need to explain more, but maybe you can talk about a little bit about your choice in the film not to have difficult conversations or to point the finger at, there's a conversation about sort of the cultural erasure of Native Americans, and it feels like it's a little bit of a mirror to some of the life that this multiracial American family is living, and you'd never asked that head on, and maybe it's something you did ask, you didn't include in the film, but maybe talk a little bit about not having difficult conversations and that choice.
I felt like that was, that was a scene it wasn't a direct, it was such a big American, it was like you're saying, it draws into the historical erasure of Native American, there's a conversation about boarding schools there, and then in some ways, these children who have Native American heritage are also facing similar erasure of their culture, and I felt it was best left, like there was so much happening there that I wanted the audience to sort of really wrestle with it as an American experience, not as something that is individual about their lives alone. And therefore we chose not to, if they were going to unpack it in their lives, it then becomes this one story versus thinking about it a little bit larger than that. So that was the decision to leave that out. Yeah.
I would add that, maybe related to what you were saying about like linguistic ability. I grew up in Hong Kong. My Mandarin understanding is about like 60%, and I actually think that like helped being both like a little bit of an insider to mainland Chinese culture, but then also being this outsider. I think it somehow disarms people a little bit when they know that you don't understand everything, that you're a little bit like a fool or like a naive person who's kind of.
I totally relate to that.
Yeah,
I feel like having a little bit of an outsider status,
Exactly.
especially when you're in a culture. I think a lot of our cultures are this way, where you're supposed to know all the politics and all the players and all the things, but if you're a little bit outside.
Yeah, but then you're still a little bit of an insider because you partially understand. So they I think one of the biggest things that our participants were concerned about was national security and whether they would be breaking any laws by participating in our documentary if they inadvertently made China look bad. And throughout the process, we were always assuring them, like, I'm from Hong Kong, my family would be at stake too, the whole crew is from China. We all have something at stake in not making China look bad through our film, because this is not a political film, it's a love story.
There's another level of cheating, like, am I making my family look bad, or am I making the
they were
whole country look bad?
Yeah, they were much more concerned at that national level, and I think having this partial identity was able to get us access.
Did you want to say something, Tony?
Hello. I don't see my film as like gonzo journalism, but I do think that there's a level of shock that it continues to happen in my film. Like, for example, but with Kyle, the YouTuber, he's fluent in Vietnamese. He's a younger cat too, like in his mid-30s, and I think just his fluency skills and being a younger person, talking to older folks and so forth. Kind of to your point, it was a little bit disarming, and knowing that he was also Vic Gil, like a Vietnamese American, those folks knowing. But yeah, I mean, he was asking, some like a lot of shocking kind of stuff to people that that I'd run up on, like that might have been I thought there was somebody I thought was my brother, like potentially my older brother. And so we just he's like, can I just say, so I'm like, yes, but yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I mean, you guys have all sort of implied the roles of some of the people that worked on your film. Films are all made by huge teams of people who are very dedicated, many of whom don't get to sit on the stage and have these conversations. So I'm curious about two things. Number one, I think you spoke specifically about this, about your producer taking on specific roles, and maybe you guys can talk very specifically about some of the things you thought was better, some of the difficult conversations that you divided amongst you, and who was going to take them, and why you made those choices. And number two, I feel like I've always had very difficult internal conversations on my team. There are often fights and arguments as you're going through making a film, and how maybe you can just reflect on how difficult some of the internal conversations you're having with your team are, and maybe give some advice to folks that are going to inevitably be going through those difficult conversations on their own film teams. So 2 parts, how do you navigate your conversations with each other, and how do you game to all play the best role in making the film and the production come out right?
I think in terms of internal sort of politics among a film crew, and I think the DPA has helped a lot with this, what a producer is, the definition of different types of producing. I think a lot of conflicts can arise out of the murkiness of that area. And I think what I've learned is to be very clear from the very beginning, delineate roles between different producers, and what each of those roles would mean in terms of a hierarchy. I think that's really important to set out from the beginning, and to be firm about it.
Gosh, I wish I had a single producer throughout the project. It was a patchwork of people coming in at different stages. for some productions, especially when we were in New Mexico and stuff, right? Like there were so many moving parts. I'm so grateful for the field people taking on all of those other logistical, that I could just stay with the family. In terms of the edit, there was a lot, like I had a lot of editing advisors. That was, for me, it was really important to have an ensemble story. Like that, this was a film that had two moms that were navigating decisions, and whatever choices they were making was affecting who these two girls were becoming. And so I wanted a window into all their, how they were all shaping the things. Definitely there was a lot of push for a story that was going to favor one mom as, this, hero's journey. And that was something I was very resistant to, that was something we had a lot of back and forth about, and I was, I put my foot down on that one. But it was, I think in the later it was in the later, like you're saying, like, having clear communications about what each team member's role is, and when, having opportunities to have conversations very early on when desires for the film don't align is a good way to navigate, but you really need a team. It's rough to do this alone.
Well, my film's my personal film, and I'm the director of it, and so but I had a lot of consultants, and actually Don Young of CAAM was like a very helpful voice of reason. With my film, I actually, after locking picture, I had to consult with a therapist. There's a outfit called Film in Mind. It's like therapists that work on documentaries, because my film, there's conversations about sexual violence that my mother talks about, and my kids were going to be, who are in the film and actually help do some of the shooting as well, they're going to be hearing this for the first time. And so I had to consult with other professionals, like how best practices to talk about this with my kids before they see it. Like they're going to be at the screening tonight. I mean, they've seen it themselves, but to have these conversations, so it's like unpacking the conversations on screen, but then also, at least with my film, having to talk about it, with my mother as well. I had to do a little private screening with her, to make sure that she was cool with everything.
In a minute, we'll open up some questions to the audience, but I want to know what you guys think is the most difficult emotion for participants to share on screen. Is it anger, shame, tears? What do you think was the most difficult for participants to reveal to the camera?
I don't think they were super conscious about, I think about what, most of those kind of things happen when the moments were so charged that they were not even aware of what was going on. And it was only after the fact that they're even thinking about it. So, but in terms of access, I think the parents did not want the children's most vulnerable, difficult moments in life to become permanent records. So those were off limits. Yeah.
It's hard for me to answer that question because it felt like the participants in our film were so open and willing to be vulnerable. And the one thing that I do feel maybe missing from our portrait of their love triangle is affection. Mm-hmm. And maybe this has to do with, this may be culture specific, but I think between the husband and wife and between the husband and the mistress, it felt like they couldn't express affection in the way that you might expect in Western culture.
I mean, one of the things I really love about your filmmaking is incredibly cinematic. You've got these long shots of, spoons and utensils in the kitchen, and I think you're in an elevator with somebody. You're watching them wake up. I always struggled with this, having worked in TV, is how do you access those I'm going to be with you when your alarm goes off and your hair is all crazy and you're waking up in the morning. Can you just talk practically about producing some of those things? It sounds like you follow, but if you're following somebody like, you know, the opening, you know, the cinematic setup shots where the door is opening or closing, sometimes you're having to ask for those things in advance. And maybe you can talk about step by step how you practically access those things.
So like you, our participants only agreed to a few days of filming at the beginning. And but then, you know, the case unfolded over 4 months and they felt okay with us filming and we would ask for more and more and more. And, you know, with like the getting up shots, that you only have to do that one time in the 4 months, where you're like, can I come really early?
And what do? You sleep on their floor?
No, I think they have to open the door to let us in, and then they're getting back into bed.
Oh.
Yeah, so, yeah.
And about like in opening and entering doors, it's like stop right there and I'll get the shot and then you can come out, or?
No, I'm always just like hurtling in front of them, trying to get as fast as possible. I don't tend to tell people to reenact stuff because I feel like if you're filming with them for 4 months, they're going to be opening and closing doors at many times. So even if I miss it this one time, I'll get it another time. Yeah. I just have to move fast.
Did you want to say something, Tony?
At least with my film, I think anger is tougher to show, and it's kind of like to your point earlier about like with that camera on, you know, it's like a little bit of a check, because I saw myself. There were moments when I was like in that conversation scene with my mother where I wanted to get really angry, but it's like I want to be seen in a decent light, and I turned into the Hulk right here. But yeah.
So I think everyone should like stretch for 2 seconds. It gets tight in those chairs. I want to open up the floor to questions. If people have questions, I think we have about 15 minutes left. So I see a couple questions already. So let's just go to the audience right here in the front. And do you guys want people? Can you guys hear in the room if they just talk loudly? If she asks her questions and you can't hear, raise your hand and I'll repeat it. Why did you want to make this film?
I'll go first. It's a very personal film. I never knew who my pops was, and since I hold a camera and shoot and stuff, yeah, I wanted to document that search, and yeah, that's it.
Well, I wanted to adopt, and I didn't know if, you know, brown people could adopt in the United States, and if they did, if the children were white or black, in a society where race is such a contentious issue, how am I going to raise them? If I grew up in India, you know, whatever I'm learning about the culture seems so little and so not enough to deal with. And then what happens to my language, my religion, culture, right? So when I found the family, I reached out to them to talk about that, and then the more I filmed, the less I wanted to adopt, because because I didn't, you know, when you're going into this thing, you're only thinking about your need, and you're thinking about, I want something to fill happiness in my life, and you don't realize that, oh, the children were someone else's, you know, someone else relinquished their children. There's heartache there. The children are going through their own versions of heartache, and I'm like, why are we having this kind of a systemic? So I think what happened in the process of filming it is the amount of awareness. I'm like, why are we not having this as prospective, you know, people who want to adopt? Why is this not there? And why are we thinking about, why do we want to unseat some, like, why are we not, what happened to this village of raising children? Why can I not be this temporary adult in you know, people's life? And then becoming clear that what I want is intergenerational relationships, and parenting is one way of having that. So the film gave me that huge gift of becoming aware of my needs about motherhood, but also understanding that adoption is super messy and it involves too many people, and we do not really have honest, deep conversations about it.
My first film had taken place in Turkey. It followed a stray dog around Istanbul as it overheard conversations unfolding around the dog. And that was such an incredible, eye-opening experience to interact with a culture that was totally foreign than my own. I learned so much. And so I knew that for my second film, I wanted to set it in mainland China because I wanted to get to know China more as a country and a culture that's close to home, but yet not really fully my own. And I've always just loved romance movies, rom-coms, and so I wanted to find a way to tell a love story set in China. Also because all the rom-coms that I've grown up in, grew up with from the West, they didn't reflect the kind of love that I saw in my own home growing up in Hong Kong, where, you know, affection is, you know, at a more muted level, and, you know, what's left unsaid carries so much more than what's said out loud. And, you know, love is tied up with duty and sacrifice. And so using the crisis of infidelity, that was the entryway into finding out, and into being able to document and portray how love is expressed in this region of the world that's closer to home for me.
Someone else had a question. In the yellow in the hat in the middle.
Yeah, I had a question for Year of the Cat. If you could talk a little bit more about what prompted you to reach out to a YouTuber. Was it just like you wanted a helping hand? You know, because I feel like that's a crossover that you would think would happen more often than it does, but they're really two kind of separate spheres, I think.
I guess Cousin Z says no to me a few times in the movie, but the first time where she's like, hey, Cousin Z is someone I matched with on an Ancestry site, and she's on my dad's side. When she said no to me, I was just like, I don't know what to do, and she was also questioning the validity of our first cousin match, and I, you know, just because my Vietnamese skills were so terrible, or is so terrible, I needed to just, you know, try to recruit somebody else who had those language skills. And I just went on a deep dive, like, you know, Google search for first, I interviewed potential PIs, private investigators based here in the States and also in Vietnam, because at the time, I didn't know where my father was. I thought he could be in Europe, Vietnam, here in the States. And then I came across Kyle, and then one of my transcribers, is that the term? Yeah, one of the people that transcribed, you know, some of my interviews, Vietnamese language interviews, was like, have you heard of Kyle Lay as well? So people kept on referring to him, and so I just did a cold email to him, and fortunately he got back to me and was willing to come on board. He's an associate producer on the film. He's actually going to be here. I think he's flying in from LA right now.
What's the relationship going to be with his content? Did you negotiate what he's going to be able to use for his own content, or is he just a character in the film?
He's just a character in the film.
So he's not going to be able to use the footage for him his own YouTube?
No. I mean, I think he's filming right now. Like he's one of the, you know, he has his DJI kind of 3. Like we screened down in LA, and so he was there. And but he's. I think he's a sought-after YouTuber who Vietnamese folks around the world believe in terms of his skills of helping, you know, locate missing loved ones, and so he made a difference in my, you know, like in my search as well.
I saw a couple other hands out there, right behind the guy with the hat.
Hi, I was wondering, you often, as documentary filmmakers, I'm sure you have to sift through hundreds of hours of footage, and I was wondering what kind of editing techniques and workflows and rituals are helpful for you to kind of pin down the most important footage? Are you editing in your head as you're shooting? Do you really watch like every single second of footage, and like how does it all come together in the edit?
I will say with our film, this is my second feature-length documentary. My first film, I edited all on my own. And with that one, I went down all these rabbit holes, trial and error, figuring out different storylines, realizing they don't work, and then going back to the original idea. With this second film, we were able to hire Charlotte Munch-Bengtson, who's a veteran film editor who worked on All That Breathes, Truffle Hunters, The Act of Killing. And so with that expertise, she very concretely saved us months of trial and error. When she got the footage, she looked it over, and she was like, we just have to focus on this one couple, this one love triangle that you got such deep access to. Because we had 6 other storylines of couples that, I, as the director and cinematographer, was not eager to let go of. Like, I would have spent months trying to figure out how to weave them all in, just to not lose some of those incredible scenes. But she was like, no, this couple is sacred. And so with her 20 years of experience more than me, she was able to sort of cut back on that rabbit hole time. And she was right. And I accepted that idea instantly because it was also a return to our original seed of the idea, which was to do a Rashomon of a love triangle.
I mean, if you're a director in the room, your money best spent is on an editor for sure. Did you guys want to add anything, or should we go to another question?
Well, my film had over 100 hours of material, and I stand behind it. But the insecure artist in me is like, I ended up cutting my own personal film. So, but my film had a clear through line. Like, it's like naively, I was like, I don't know who my dad is. A, B is find out who my dad is. But along the way, like I try to explore the past a little bit. I go off and here and there. But yeah, so mine had a clear through line.
Mine did not, and I had many years of footage, and also the children grow up over time, so there's not sometimes you cannot mess with that chronology too much. We did watch everything. I had 3 consultants help at different stages of the film process, and also we had like a couple of keywords that helped us sort of like bridge and connection and healing were words that we were using to sort of bring that together. It was a lot of trial and error and messy steps before we found our story.
Chithra, you're premiering this weekend, and you guys have all had big premieres for your films with very difficult things for people to see on screen when they haven't seen the film yet. I'm curious, each of you, how have you prepared your participants for the film, number one, and also for the film premiere, which I think is a separate thing when they're seeing it maybe for the first time or the second time with a big audience?
So we traveled back to China before totally finishing the film to show each of the participants to get their blessing and to see if they reconsented to being in the project. And they were super gracious. They mostly were focused on like the cinematography and the craft and the editing and how hard we worked, which speaks to the kind of people they are that would give themselves over to a film in the first place. They're super unself-conscious, remarkably. And in terms of the premiere, we invited them, but the participants themselves didn't want to come, I think, because it would probably be too awkward. And the Mistress Dispeller herself, she couldn't get a visa to travel. So we haven't seen the film with an audience with them yet.
And have they been affected or impacted by press and things like that around the film?
So one of the conditions that they agreed to participate in our film was that the film would not be released in China. So yeah.
How have you prepared your family and yourself and your participants for the premiere? And and also, did they watch it in advance?
So I had the great fortune of 2 weeks ago showing it in Indianapolis at a small Indianapolis festival, but it was like an exclusive first look, and the theaters were so cool because there was a full bar and restaurant, but in addition to that, it was really intimate because it only sat like 50 people, and it showed like midday, like Saturday, Sunday, and very small theaters. So it had this very private kind of setting. And the first screening, like 30 of my family members were there, including my mother, some of the other cast members. A lot of my family's in the film, and so long story short. It was so, I felt so good showing it sharing it with them first, kind of getting their stamp of approval and their blessing before it played in LA and And
did you walk them through what was going to be in the film, or you just said show up and it's going to be small?
Yeah, well, 2 of my girl cousins came to both screenings, and that was kind of, they wanted to see it again. And I go back to Indiana like every Thanksgiving, and so we're going to try to do like and this year marks the 50th anniversary of our family in the States. Like we came over right after the fall of Saigon, and so it's a big year for us, and so they want to try to rent out a theater and show family again. But tonight's going to be the first time that my kids have seen it, but like my kids are seeing it with an audience, and then also one of my sisters that I've met on this search it's gonna be her first time. And when I was telling her about the film, she's like, how did you film Dad? There's no, and so I was like, no, it's about me searching for him. And then she's just like, I don't know how you got this film to be 98 minutes long. It's like you don't have that many pictures of Dad. But I was like, well, you'll see. Yeah, but
in my film, both the moms, at least at the advanced edit stage, they knew what was going to be in the film. And before we picture locked, definitely, because there are 3 minors, I had the mom see the film and sign off. 3 days ago, I offered all the children to watch the film. 2 of them wanted to, so they wanted to see it by themselves, so they had their headphones on the iPad. They had 3 note cards to write down what they filled the 3 note cards. We had a conversation about the film. Mostly, they didn't have any, it was mostly they were surprised at their younger selves because they don't remember half the stuff. Very happy with the story. They want to take it to their schools. The other child wanted to see it with an audience. I'm terrified of what that's going to be like. They're all going to be here. The most surprising part is a social worker that connected the moms many, many years ago, almost 16 years ago, saw the trailer on the web and reached out back to the mom, and she's flying into town to come and see the film because she's so moved that they're still in touch. So one mom has not seen the film but wants to see it with the audience. The dad has not seen it, and he apparently cries for every film. So he's like, I can only cry one time, and I'm going to do it with the audience. So he has not seen the film.
Well, I'm excited for all of you to have your premiere at CAAMFest. Tony, you're tonight at 8:30 at Kabuki. When is yours? Saturday?
Sunday at 2 p.m. Get food, get a brunch with mom, and bring mom and come
Mother's
to screening.
Saturday at 12.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the panelists. This is a great conversation. I hope you all see their films.